The story begins with a man standing alone at the edge of the frontier, where the desert sky bleeds into the horizon and the air tastes of dust and silence. His head is pulled low, his boots sunk into the earth as if they carry the weight of every choice he has ever made. The wind tugs at his coat, and though the land stretches endless and free, he feels trapped by the memory of one woman, her smile, her voice, her touch that burned brighter than any western sun. Folks in that town would tell you he was just another drifter, another cowboy chasing cattle and shadows. But if you had looked closer, if you had seen the way his eyes lingered on the church steps, where she once stood, you'd have known there was more. A story too heavy for a man to carry alone. A story that began with love, but was written in dust and blood. He had not come west searching for trouble. He had come searching for peace, for a patch of land to call his own, for a chance to breathe free. Yet the West has a way of testing every man's heart, and when love found him unexpected, unwanted by some, and forbidden by others, it demanded a price he never imagined paying. Tonight, as the sky burned orange and shadows stretched across the prairie, he whispered her name to the wind. Regret filled his chest, but not sorrow alone. For though his heart had been broken, though he had given up everything, he knew he would make the same choice again. Because love on the frontier was never simple, and no one in that dusty town expected what he would give up in the name of love. The West in those days was a land of promise and peril, a place where dreams were built on shifting sands and fortunes could vanish with the turn of a card. Endless plains rolled out beneath a sky so wide it seemed to swallow a man whole, and every horizon carried both hope and danger. By day, the desert sun baked the earth until it cracked like old leather. By night, the stars glimmered cold and countless, lighting the trail for those with courage enough to chase tomorrow. On the edge of this restless wilderness sat a town no bigger than a handful of streets. Its heart beat to the clatter of horse hooves and the sound of hammers striking nails, as men built futures out of timber and grit. The saloon's piano played nightly, spilling laughter and sorrow into the dusty street, while the church bell rang each Sunday morning, calling weary souls to kneel and seek salvation. It was a town balanced between sin and salvation, between whiskey and prayer. It was here that the cowboy made his life, a quiet man who asked for little more than the sweat of honest work and the solitude of open skies. His hands bore the calluses of hard labor, his eyes the calm steadiness of someone who knew how to endure. He worked the cattle, mended fences, and spoke few words, but when he did, they carried the weight of sincerity. And yet, beneath that rugged exterior, something stirred the moment he first saw her. She was unlike anyone he had ever known, grace woven with fire, her presence soft as a spring breeze, yet strong enough to unmake him. In that small frontier town, amid dust and storms, his heart had found its reason to beat faster. Love in the West was never a gentle thing. It was fierce, unyielding, like the desert wind that carved canyons out of stone. For the cowboy, it began with a stolen glance, a meeting of eyes across the churchyard, and from that moment, he knew he was lost. She carried herself with grace, her laughter ringing like silver bells, but behind her beauty lay chains. He could not see chains forged by promises made long before he arrived in that town. She belonged, at least in name, to another, a wealthy land baron who owned half the valley, a man whose grip on the town was as cold and merciless as iron. He had money, power, and a kind of ruthless ambition that made men bow their heads and women lower their eyes. To cross him was to invite ruin. And yet, she was bound to him, her family indebted, her future sold in the name of security. The whispers began almost as soon as the cowboy's gaze lingered too long. In the saloon, men muttered over whiskey glasses. In the mercantile, women whispered behind bonnets. Even the preacher, with his kind eyes, warned softly of the dangers of tempting fate. But warnings could not cool a fire once lit. So they met in secret, hearts pounding in the hush of twilight, beneath the old oak tree by the river, where the moonlight turned the water silver. They stole moments that belonged only to them. His hands rough from labor, hers soft but trembling with fear. They clung to each other as if the world might end by dawn. Yet danger crept closer with every meeting. The land baron's men had eyes everywhere. A slip of the tongue, a glimpse of shadows where they shouldn't be, and the walls of secrecy began to close in. Their love, as pure as it felt, had become a crime in the eyes of the town, a love the world refused. And though they tried to hide it, the frontier has a way of dragging every secret into the open. The days of secrecy could not last forever. The walls were closing in, the whispers turning into accusations, and the baron's gaze narrowing like a hawk circling prey. The lovers felt the noose tighten, each stolen moment carrying more fear than joy. Hope was a fragile thing, fading like smoke in the desert wind. And yet, just when despair threatened to break them, an unexpected voice rose in their defense. The town's preacher, a man worn thin by years of dust and doubt, stepped forward. He had seen the way their eyes met, the way their hearts spoke louder than their words, and he could no longer stand by. Love, he told the cowboy, is the only law greater than fear. With quiet courage, he offered them sanctuary, a chance to fight back not with guns, but with faith. But the West rarely allowed love to bloom without blood. That very night, a storm swept through the valley, lightning ripping across the sky, wind tearing shingles from rooftops. Amid the chaos, betrayal struck. A friend who had once shared whiskey with the cowboy sold their secret for the baron's gold. Men rode hard through the rain, rifles gleaming under the storm's fury as thunder roared. The cowboy realized the truth that had been building all along. Their love could not survive. Without sacrifice, someone would have to pay the price. And in his heart, he already knew who it must be. The dust had turned to fire, and the flames demanded everything. The storm gave way to a bruised sky, clouds torn apart by the rising sun. The town awoke to silence, heavy and expectant, as if the earth itself held its breath. Dust drifted lazily through the streets, curling around shuttered windows and empty porches. Everyone knew what was coming. A reckoning had been called, and it would not pass quietly. The cowboy rode in from the outskirts, his horse's hooves striking sparks against the hardpan. His face was set, jaw tight, eyes locked forward. There was no fear left in him, only the steady calm of a man who had made his choice. She had begged him to run, to vanish into the desert and let the town rot without them. But he could not. Some loves were too pure to survive in hiding. Some wrongs could only be righted in the open. The baron was waiting at the far end of Main Street. His men lined up along the boardwalks, rifles gleaming in the fading light. He stood with arrogance painted across his face, confident that wealth and power had already written the ending. But wealth could not buy courage, and the cowboy had something stronger than gold. He had love, and the will to die for it. The duel was inevitable. Hats tipped low, hands hovering near holsters, the crowd scattered into shadows. A single heartbeat stretched into forever. Then came the crack of gunfire, echoing across the valley like thunder. Dust exploded, wood splintered, and the air filled with the scent of powder. When the smoke cleared, the baron lay in the dirt, his empire crumbling with him. But the cowboy did not stand unscathed. A red bloom spread across his shirt, his legs trembling, yet his eyes still fixed on her. She rushed into the street, tears streaking her face, cradling him as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire. His hand found hers, rough and trembling. With the last of his strength, he whispered words meant only for her, words that carried the weight of every mile he'd ridden, every battle he'd fought. And then, as the final rays of sunlight kissed the horizon, he gave her the only gift he had left: his sacrifice, his love, his life. That night, the town would never forget. They had witnessed not just a duel, but a love that burned brighter than bullets, brighter than the setting sun itself. The gun smoke drifted away, carried off by the evening wind, and the town stood still as if carved in stone. Men lowered their rifles, women pressed hands to their mouths, and children peeked from behind skirts and shutters. For all the years they had feared the baron's grip, for all the power he had wielded, it had ended in a single moment: one man's courage against another's greed. And though the cowboy's body faltered, his sacrifice had broken the chains that bound her. They laid him beneath the wide cottonwood tree on the hill, where the prairie grass swayed and the sky stretched endless above. The townsfolk gathered, hats in hands, their silence heavy with respect. He had not been born among them, but his blood had written him into their soil. For the first time in years, the town felt free, freed not by law nor by wealth, but by love's final act. She stood there long after the others left, her hand resting on the wooden cross that bore no name, only the mark of his passing. Tears fell, but there was strength in them, too. His love had not been in vain. The Baron was gone, his empire crumbled, and the town would never again bow to fear. In the years to come, she would walk those streets with her head held high, and though her heart carried a hollow place no one else could fill, she carried his memory like a lantern lighting her path, reminding her of a man who gave everything so she might be free. A quiet grave, yes, but a living memory that would outlast the desert, the dust, and even time itself. Now, friends, the trail brings us here, to the question that lingers long after the dust has settled. The cowboy made his choice, he laid down his life so that love could live. But the West has always been a land of hard decisions, and not every man would walk the same path. So I'll ask you this, if you were standing in his boots, staring down the barrel of destiny, what would you do? Would you risk everything for love, even knowing it might cost you your life? Or would you turn your horse toward the horizon, choosing survival over sacrifice? There's no right or wrong answer, only the truth you carry in your heart. Tell me your choice in the comments below. Your voice is part of this story now, and I'd reckon folks out here would like to know. What would you choose? Out on the frontier, where life was measured in sunsets and survival often came before dreams, love still found a way to carve its mark. It was never easy, never safe. It asked for courage, for sacrifice, and sometimes for everything a soul could give. The cowboy's story reminds us that true love does not bend to fear, nor does it shrink from the storms of life. It stands tall, like the lone cottonwood against the wind, rooted deep even when the world tries to tear it down. His heart may have fallen silent, but the light of his devotion burns on, proof that even in the harshest lands, hearts can shine brighter than the desert sun. And so the lesson remains in the end. It is not wealth nor power, nor even survival that defines us, but the love we dare to hold, and the sacrifices we are willing to make for it.